Hello everyone out there in YouTube and Facebook and on the internet. It's great to be here with you once again. My name is Marcus. I'm one of KabbU's many instructors, and so here I'm with Tal Mandelbaum, also one of KabbU's many instructors and also a social psychologist by profession. How you going, Tal?
Great to be here.
Yeah, and today we're going to be talking about self-criticism. We're going to get into this topic. We're going to look at a few clips from a show that Kabbalist Dr. Michael Laitman, together with Tal, Oren, Nitza Mazos, many fellow instructors have been working on with him for many years on really getting into all kinds of topics related to this world and opening them up. And we'll see a few clips from that. We'll talk a bit about it. We'll get into this topic a bit. And Tal, maybe you want to introduce us to the topic in general, self-criticism.
Yeah. I think it's a really important topic because so many of us find ourselves criticizing ourselves. We have this inner self-talk that can often be negative. And we know from psychology that this is something that we absorb as children, really from when we're babies. We hear from our environments criticism, or the way that we are educated when we're told that we're not okay or that we are okay, what is good, what is bad. And then we end up internalizing this voice inside of our head that might be stern, strict, maybe even making us feel bad about ourselves, stopping us from doing things that we love and want to do, stopping us from expressing ourselves if this voice was really too strong and controlling. And so when we grow up, we begin to be more aware of this self-criticism, and we oftentimes, a lot of us try and heal it. And there are all kinds of things that we do to heal it. We often try and learn positive thinking, all kinds of methods to change how we feel, how we talk to ourselves, so that we can be happier and we can express ourselves more freely. And yet, in my experience as a psychologist and also one who has been studying Kabbalah for many, many years and teaching it, I've seen how Kabbalah gives us a whole new framework through which to understand our inner world and how to become more happy and fulfilled human beings. So I really hope that today on this show, we're going to learn this new perspective and new tools to help us overcome negative self-criticism, maybe even learn how criticism can be done, but in a positive and promoting way. And it's just going to shed some light on this topic and just help us take some steps to a better, more fulfilled place for ourselves and in our world.
Yeah, great. It's I really got the impression when I saw the episode that you did a lot of preparation to see how people look into this topic from different areas in the world, and how Dr. Laitman gives a very unique perspective. So let's already go into the first clip. Maybe we can already start feeding off what Dr. Laitman said. Another thing here is just how much depth there is with every single word that came out of his mouth, that you can really expand on everything and almost give like a full lecture about it, which is exactly where this show came from. Mm-hmm. So we'll go already into the first clip. We'll watch one of these clips from New Life. It's from New Life episode 687, right?
Yes, right.
Mistaken. All right, so let's go into it. Let's see what Dr. Laitman has to say about the topic.
All of us completely, where there's none else besides him, that system that is controlling us, controlled us, influenced us this way, and myself as well, and there's nothing to say about the past. What happened, happened. I don't understand why things happened the way they did, but it's in the past, and therefore I have to look forward instead of backward. And the person has eyes in order to look forward. And only a fool constantly looks back in order to be smart retrospectively, to be a wise guy, so to speak. That, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I do this? I lost here, I lost there. No, nothing about the past. Because every moment that passed, right now, a moment passed since the moment I said, right now. This is how it has to be. It's predetermined that this is how it's going to happen, and I couldn't have changed anything. So your attitude says that everything's pre-written? Yes, but you can go into those things that are pre-written, into those future things, and change them from a bad way to a good way by identifying with the entire process that you have to go through. And this is specifically what the wisdom of Kabbalah teaches a person.
All right. It's you're on mute, Tal.
Yeah, thank you. So here, Rav Lightman, what he's really talking about how oftentimes when something happens like a moment ago or in the past, and then we start criticizing ourselves over what happened and like eating ourselves up. Like, why did I do it that way? Why didn't I do it another way? Right? And we have this, we can really spend a long time in this inner kind of chatter that is telling us off for what we've done, right? So he's talking about that kind of scenario and explaining from this very high perspective why that is really redundant, like really nothing even close to reality.
All right. One of the aspects of that, you don't hear me?
No, I hear an echo of myself. I hope the viewers.
It's probably because it's coming through here. Let me put this down a bit. It's better.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, and one of the big aspects there is something that you won't hear about in psychology so much, about how everything is predetermined. That's already coming from a Kabbalistic point of view, or Kabbalistic worldview, that now our destiny is all pre-written. It reminds me of this example we give of how you got this movie playing, and we're all like characters in the movie. And, you know, what's a character in the movie? A character in the movie is one who doesn't know what's going to happen in the next moment, is kind of locked in this script that's playing through him, locked through the actors playing through him, looked through all these sets and lighting and all the stuff that's been prepared. And at the very base of it is the writer, the director, who made all that happen and who's working on that whole thing. And Kabbalah invites a person, like what Dr. Lightman mentioned there, invites a person to not necessarily change what's happening in that movie. I mean, the movie's pre-written. This is the whole thing that Dr. Lightman was saying. It's all predetermined. But to start entering that same view of what's happening from the writer-director, to actually see what's going on at that level. And then you have a whole different perspective. You see the beginning, you see the end, and you see what's happening in the middle. And then you see that what happened in a previous moment, there's no point in trying to criticize ourselves on it. They mentioned a saying from the Torah that says, a fool sits with hands crossed and eats his own flesh. That's how the Torah describes someone who's criticizing themselves and thinking that they could have done something better, or that they made some kind of mistake in the past, which is all their responsibility, that they could have changed it. And Kabbalah comes and says, no. There's this other saying in Kabbalah, there is none else besides him. There's nothing but a single force that created, that runs everything, above time, space, and motion, which all of what we perceive as time, space, and motion exists within that force, and there's nothing that we can change within that. And only we can change how we perceive it, and to see it not from the point of view of the character that's being completely acted on, but from the point of view of that director that's and writer-director that's really like seeing everything over there, the creator, as we say in the Kabbalah.
Yeah, that is so powerful to help us kind of out of our own skin and to really observe what is happening to us from above. It is, and also I think we often have this feeling that we are in control somehow, that we have, right? When we think that we've done something wrong, basically what we're saying is, I am in control. And here Kabbalah is saying, no, you're not. You're not in control. There is something bigger than you happening, a process, a system. You call it a movie. It's like a movie. Things that have to happen, that have to take place, a process of learning, of development that is happening to you that you didn't choose, right? You didn't choose it. You didn't choose to be born within that environment you were born, to gain the characteristics or personality that you did, or to have the DNA that determines all kinds of attributes that you have. We didn't choose any of that. We don't choose, the time changing, at least in our perspective. We're getting older. So the more that you ponder that, you understand how little control we really have. And that's what's fascinating about Kabbalah, that it both helps you let go of the fake or illusory control and understand that one place where you can influence this movie. And there is a point of free choice that we have. And when we learn to use our power to shift reality through that one point of free choice, that's where we actually use our power correctly, right? Instead of maybe getting angry at ourselves or criticizing ourselves for things we didn't really choose and had no real control over, because if it happened a moment ago, it needed to happen. This is something we have to sit with sometimes, and it's not so easy to accept. So instead of eating ourselves up, we learn what is the point where we can actually influence reality. I think there is a saying, like, God, help me see what I have control over, what I don't have
Yeah.
control over, right? And
Yeah.
that's a really important thing for us in our life.
I actually want to jump because from what you just said, because I remember that was a huge point that they talk about later in the show, about where we can actually actualize our free choice and what we should be focusing on instead of criticizing ourselves. That stuff has happened. Let's say, maybe it seems like I did some action which had some domino effect and really had maybe a negative influence on my life or on other people's lives. And a person could really be hitting themselves for that. Think about all the people in prisons now for certain things that they did. And in all kinds of situations, maybe a person suffers financially or health-wise or in a relationship due to maybe some mistake that they did or seeming mistake that they did. And it's very hard to come to a person and say, look, there's none else besides him. You didn't do anything. But also, if we think about, everyone even watching this now could even just think in their own lives, go back many years and think about like what you went through and what you did. And does it even feel like that was you doing it when you look back at it from now? It almost seems as if you really start seeing as if it is like some character doing a whole bunch of stuff. That was just acted on, and you worked according to what you had back then, but you didn't really feel anything. So you can even just see it from your own life, that perspective. So I thought I'll jump through to clip number 3 already, where Dr. Laitman does start mentioning how what we should be focusing on, that point of free choice and what that actually means from a Kabbalist's perspective. Let's have a look at that for a second.
If you arrange your life so that every time you try to be under the influence of this good force, in addition to the evil force which you have, then you already start being grateful for the bad force, because then the bad force is in balance with the good force and you exist in between the two, because life can't be plus without a minus or a minus without a plus. What is that evil force? The evil force is our ego, where I want everything only for myself. And the good force? The good force is that I have to give, and give everyone. And then if I'm balanced in between these two forces, I build myself towards my family, the environment, society, the nation, the country, all countries, the entire world. If I draw this force, it's not that I'm operating. This is important to understand. I'm not going to correct the world. It's only that through me, I open a faucet for this good force to come to the world and make the world a better place. That's it. I, myself, I'm not deciding on anything, only to bring the maximum presence of positive force into our world.
Not to focus on anything, but to bring the maximum presence of the positive force into our world. You want to say something about that?
Yeah, well, that was very deep. I think we should probably open that up a little bit, because Kabbalah, it really takes you so way beyond, the psychological view of things, where you see life as a play of forces. And what Kabbalah really explains to us is that, firstly, we are operated by what's called the negative force or the ego. That's what is present in our life to begin with. It's that will to receive. It's that motivation we have inside of us to constantly fulfill changing desires. And that is like an engine that is constantly pushing us in our life to do things, to achieve things, to get what we want. And that is how, we are on the default level. And then Kabbalah comes and tells us, and this is going to be in another video, that there comes a time in a person's life and also in humanity's development where we begin to feel and see that this isn't enough. And even we see how this ego, it begins to be very detrimental. Like we were talking about before, we begin to eat ourselves up, like you were saying, eat our own flesh with all of those comparisons, right? And how we criticize ourselves and how we compete all the time. And life becomes very difficult, especially in our times where we're so interconnected with social media. And, we're just constantly bombarded with all of these commercials showing us things that we need or should want or should be. And then we end up feeling very depressed oftentimes, very lonely, anxious because of all the chaos in the world. And so Kabbalah says to us that's because we're only operated by this one force, the negative force of reception, that we're constantly trying to receive, to feel good individually. And it's inviting us to see that what will actually make us feel better, it's not just to make ourselves feel better individually, like positive self-talk or all these different methods that we know exist to try and kind of put a plaster on that negative self-talk that's going on. It's actually helping us to see that there is another force in nature, a force that might be hidden from us, that is positive. And it's a force of connection. It's a force of love. It's a force of unity. And when we learn how to draw that force into our life, into our being, into our connections and relationships, that begins to create a balance that helps us to feel better. But I'm going to leave maybe to you, Marcus, why it actually helps us to feel better.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting because it's a topic, self-criticism, and you really don't hear any talk about self-criticism. The only self-criticism you have is how much can I apply myself to draw that positive force, into my life, into the lives of others, into the world, and that's all one and the same. And what's the positive force as well? It's the surrounding light, as we learn in the wisdom of Kabbalah. There's another part in that episode where Dr. Lakeman says that the way to do it is to study, to learn. That's the way to draw this positive force into the world. I'm sure people who've been following these broadcasts have heard that there's 3 means for this kind of advancement. Which we say the books, the friends, or the supportive environment, people around you who share a same goal and who share a similar desire, who are able to work on that desire to, simply put, to draw that positive force into each other's lives, into everyone, into the world, and also the teacher. It's really a kind of like a study environment, but it's setting us up with media and all kinds of means around us to maximally get influenced by the positive force. And what's the positive force? It's this. It comes from looking ahead. It comes from what's in front of us. The positive force is our next state that we haven't yet revealed. And the next state, and this is where the wisdom of Kabbalah comes in to be a very unique means and method, because here the wisdom of Kabbalah comes and says that there are people who have focused themselves so much on revealing that positive force in their lives, which means that they focused themselves on how to rise above this whole movie playing out, how to rise above the all these egoistic drives and desires that are popping up in us at every single moment. So instead of just following those like an unconscious thing, an unconscious being in this world, they managed to rise above that and keep rising and rising and rising, discovering that same level of perception and sensation as the creator himself, like as we say, the full view of nature, reaching balance with nature, reaching that same seat as the writer-director, viewing the movie. And those people wrote to us from those states and explained to us from those states what's going on there, what's happening in this fuller, much more integral view of nature that they attain. And when we ourselves immerse ourselves in what they left us and try to absorb that into us and try to apply that in our lives, applying that is also a part of attracting the positive force, meaning that we meet with others who share that same aspiration and we try to implement what is happening in that positive force. What's a positive force? If we're considering our own force, the egoistic one, as a negative, the minus, which is always wanting to take for my own personal benefit, always wanting to use everything around me, for my personal benefit alone. And we can see that even just, we talk about it a lot, how you have sensors. The sensors, what are they? They're receptors. They're constantly just receiving information from an unknown external source. There's this constant mode of absorbing, receiving. And then there's this desire within us that's trying to receive what? Receive pleasure. And it always tries to receive it, and it goes and dissipates in this empty space within us. And that's it. And that's the negative force that's within us, that's operating all the time. So this is why Kabbalah comes and says you should focus on nothing. You shouldn't do self-criticism, because you're just delving into that black hole more and more, and you're just there's not going to be anything that comes of it. You're not going to find anything new there. And so the solution to that is not to self-criticize and get inside yourself and scratch away at this black hole within us, but to take the other side and to attract that positive force into our lives, to try to picture that future state that nature is developing us toward. And that's, going back to what I started mentioning before, that's the unique thing about Kabbalah, that it's written by these people who attained to that nature, and all of our development is leading to a goal, leading to a final state. And the final state is all of us being completely connected with that positive force fueling our connections, which is the opposite of how we perceive our connections today. We see that we are becoming more and more interdependent, interconnected. We're developing towards that. Things have changed in our world from how they've developed over history, as even just in our own perception, we can see that. But that whole interconnection that's happening today, it's still according to that negative force. We still haven't made that switch within us to draw that positive force and to reveal what it means to feel and experience and live in this connection that's forming around us in a positive way. So that's where we're headed now. That's actually another clip. You start talking about that in another part of the show. So did you want to say anything about that before we go into the clip?
Well, yeah. First, yeah. So it's really so interesting. I think just to understand that, when we try and solve things that are bothering us, that we feel guilty about, or we don't understand well enough on the current level that we're at, we're never really going to be able to understand. We don't really understand ourselves as deeply. We don't see ourselves clearly. We don't see others clearly. We see everything through this filter of our current level of consciousness. And then, so drawing that positive force, it both brings us closer to our next state of development, but it also helps us to scrutinize, as we say, to understand better the matter that we're dealing with, our own ego, and then connection, both the negative and the positive forces. When we draw the light, the positive force, it helps us to discern, to understand ourselves and to understand life better. It just really makes us more conscious and wise human beings. And it's only from that higher point, once we've drawn the light and it's pulled us up to a higher level of consciousness, that we can really understand better what it was that we were struggling with. So when we kind of try and fix things on the current level, that's when we end up getting stuck and really digging into that hole that you were describing, that black hole. So we always want to look forward. I think Dr. Lightman says that people have eyes looking forward for that reason, that we're always looking forward, always move forward by focusing on connection, focusing on those higher states that the Kabbalists describe in their writings, in the practice. And that helps you to draw that force of the positive force of development, to pull yourself up higher. And then you will be much wiser and much more able to cope with whatever challenge you're receiving, which, by the way, you are receiving exactly for that purpose, to push you to move forward.
Yeah, I remember when I first came and started studying Kabbalah, at the parent organization of KABU, as we learn here at B'nai Baruch. So they said that everything that we put here, at B'nai Baruch, at KABU, every single article you'll encounter, every single video that's, for example, on this YouTube channel, on this Facebook page, every single post, it's all done with a single purpose, that through that you attract that positive force. Like that's everything in the wisdom of Kabbalah. The whole purpose of studying the wisdom of Kabbalah is all with that goal of attracting that positive force. And any kind of self-criticism we do, it should always be, that's what Dr. Leitman was saying throughout the whole episode. It should always be with that tweak of, only how much am I working to attract that positive force? How much can I apply myself more to this environment, to those means of the book, the friends, the teacher, as we said. How can I apply myself more to that to attract more and more of that positive force? Because that negative force is constantly growing in us. It's constantly acting on us, like constant. We have these egoistic desires popping up at every single moment. So the only solution to that is to take hold of the other side, like taking hold of the edge of a rope when we're attracting that positive force, and then we bring something new and good into our lives. Let's go into another.
The only thing we're checking for is how much did I invest in pulling in that developmental force into my life, right? That's the only thing actually worth scrutinizing.
Right, yeah. Not to get into all kinds of things now playing out in my life, maybe, some money, health, relationships problems in my life, in others' lives, maybe some kind of accident happened that I keep thinking, well, if I would have done this differently, so I would have prevented that accident. Lots of people who experience some major catastrophes or accidents, go into this kind of loop in their minds of, if I'd just, done this action, then it would have prevented this major bad thing that happened. But in the wisdom of Kabbalah, we learn that it's all predetermined. It couldn't have happened other than how it happened. And there's no benefit in going back and trying to think that you could have done something differently. And that even there was another thing that you mentioned in that show, that it's not worth even trying to learn from those things, that there's nothing to learn here, that and we see that as well. You could probably say that from psychological perspective as well, that thieves who go into prison, or all kinds of people who go into prison for all kinds of crimes, they come out after many years, and then soon they just end up doing the same crime and going back into prison. It's a very common thing. I mean, it's just one of many examples like that.
But the point is that even if one moment ago something happened that we could not control, the only place that we can have some influence is in the present moment, where we do have an opportunity to influence what happens. And that power to influence, again, will come not from learning or scrutinizing what happened, but rather looking forward and seeing how we can move forward to those higher levels of awareness through pulling and drawing the positive light, that hidden force in nature, as we have discussed. So you've just mentioned not to look back, but we should also remember the present moment as a very important point.
Right. I remember there's that article, I think it was even mentioned in the show, Letter 17 of Baal Sam, where he mentions how, when you wake up in the morning, you say that if I am not for me, then who is for me? That we attack the day with that full force of, it's all up to me to attract that positive force, into my life, into the life of others, into the world. And it's completely my personal responsibility to do that, to do that in all force. And then at the end of the day, you kind of say there is none else besides him, that, even if I did nothing at all and just sat in my couch watching TV all day, the same results would have happened.
Right, the paradox, the big paradox.
It's a huge paradox. Our linear minds just can't grasp that concept. But again, this comes from Kabbalists to attain the integral perspective of things. We're moving along with time, so we'll already go into this other clip. I'll go back to clip number 2, where it talks more about this integral perspective a bit. Let's hear Dr. Leitman say a few words about it.
Collectively, as a humanity, we're not advancing towards a better future. Of course not. Because we are led as sheep to the slaughter. It's not that we determine any future form. I think that most of us, as particular people, are afraid of mistakes. But we have no choice. We're making mistakes for sure all the time, and now we're entering such a phase in our development, we talked about it on our previous show, where we're shifting from a simple, egoistic, linear development where we're developing through our ego to where we're starting to develop in a round way. Our ego developed, and is now becoming rounder and rounder. And here there are new, different forces that are operating, influencing human society and each one of us.
Yeah, so we see about this new era that we're shifting from this. It's a huge thing. We're just talking about it, that our mind is linear, and that we're transitioning into an era where it's interesting this how Dr. Laitman uses this example of how the ego is rounding out. It's kind of rounding out on itself. I think that also requires a bit of explanation, because what does it mean that we were developing linearly throughout history? It always means that we were developing according to the egoistic impulses that are constantly surfacing in us. In the past, we had much smaller egos, much smaller desires, from the very beginning. When we were cave people, we developed through food, sex, family, shelter, over many thousands of years, just with these desires, as people can identify in cave people and how they lived. And then all of a sudden, what happens? We start identifying that other people are having things that we're not having. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, we get this feeling of envy of other people. It brings about all these exchanges. We start fencing ourselves off from each other. We start trading. I'm making oranges over here. They're making apples over there. The desires moving. So this is linear development, that we're seeing always some kind of new thing to do in our egos, and then that develops further into desires for honor, control, fame. Just look at the knowledge as well. Probably knowledge is the highest level of desire before the one that characterizes this integral rounding off in our era. So, what's knowledge? You even see from the 16th through to the 19th century how much science and philosophy, how much these fields were, highly respected, because philosophers were coming up with new ideas all the time, and they were kind of like the rock stars of the era, coming up with these new ideas that people were all throwing around here and there, coffee shops, etc., books, everything like this. And then in our era, look at a philosopher today. If someone calls themselves a philosopher, it's almost like something that you disrespect. It sounds like someone who doesn't have a job or something like that. That's how we've developed today. And science as well. It's not something where science is trying to. Science reached a kind of a limit. In the last century, where it's where advanced science, which is trying to break down what's going on with our perception and how we observe things, and you're getting quantum science, quantum physics, which is saying things like physical stuff doesn't exist, but things are popping in and out of existence all over here and there, and the only thing that we have is like we're existing in some kind of thought. You actually have physicists reaching that level. So then science as a whole just starts going, whoa, let's put that aside. Let's focus on developing technologies and things that are more tangible. So science also went in a very corporeal direction, more funding all kinds of things about technology, climate, things that we are tangible, mechanical things that we can put our hands on. And then even all these seeming if we think that we're still developing with future goals, what do we have? We have someone who's saying that we should put life on Mars. Does anyone really believe that that's going to be a solution? Kabbalah and Dr. Laitman's already talked about that topic, that there's no solution you could go even further than Mars, and you're not going to, even if you populate there and build a whole society, you're not going to make any kind of new development if you're not going to fix the person themselves, if you're not going to
run away from yourself.
Connect to the positive force. You're just going to take the problems that we have over here, over there. So this is the whole aspect of what he's talking about, how we've reached this era where that ego is rounding out on itself. There's no more linear development. There's no more next level of egoism to aspire for. It's all a big ego, and you can also see today the whole thing of like how the internet connects everyone in this round way, And also the internet is this expression of how all these same desires that we've developed we're returning to them in this very excessive way.
Yeah.
My daughter showed me some things on the internet, like communities which talk about stupid food, where they do all kinds of excessive things with food, and then other people, all kinds of excessive ways of going back to these desires we have, because there's no way of like seeing the next level. But Kabbalah comes and says that there is this next level, and it's not a linear level of development. It's not another level of the ego for us to aspire to, but it's this integral level, this integral mind. It's rising above the ego to see this new reality above what we perceive as time, space, and motion. And from there, that's the new level. That's this new integral thing that we need to reveal, and to all this interconnection that's happening today, to realize that in a positive way, by attracting that positive force in our relations, etc.
Yeah, exactly. And also, we see how, aside from what you just said, that was so interesting, how we are going back to these old desires in a kind of twisted way, trying to extract some sort of fulfillment from them. But it's just, we can't really enjoy anymore as much as we would like to, because, our desire has grown, and yet we can't find the fulfillment. The fulfillment is on a higher level. And we're also seeing that we also cannot find solutions to the problems that this new interconnected global reality is posing us. All these crises, the wars, the really terrible international relationships we're seeing now between Europe and America and Russia and Ukraine and China, all of this complex reality. And, we have depression. And of course, on the psychological level, we're also seeing that with as much as, we've become very, very individualized, and we're very smart. We have all this knowledge, but we don't really know how to make people happy. And I've even heard some voices in psychology that already are saying we need more interconnected tools to help individuals. We're just trying to treat individuals when we're all interconnected. So, people are beginning to understand that we need solutions from a higher level to treat the current problems. Like Einstein said, you can't solve the problems with the same level of thinking that created it. So I see here and there that this awareness is kind of sparking, and people are beginning to see that solutions are going to have to come from a more interconnected way of thinking to solve the problems of our interconnected world. And so Kabbalah is really very forward thinking in that sense. It's really an ancient wisdom that is exactly the solution for our modern times, where we're facing the most existential crisis humanity has ever faced. And it's really the sign that we're ready to make a leap in our conscious evolution. So the solutions exist. So we just need to open them up for everybody.
Yeah. What's interesting about that as well, because you said how Kabbalah shows this next level, where it really does. Even if you look at scientific development, you can say how Kabbalah comes and even shows where, if we're not just looking at scientific development in terms of technical things and technological things, but in terms of what they reach in terms of perception. So Kabbalah does come and say, here's the next level for you to aspire towards. The problem is that next level, it's against this very ego, or it's seemingly against the ego.
Yeah.
That the place where we feel that we can get fulfillment is not going to get fulfilled, but rather it's in another vessel, as we say in Kabbalah, another kli, the Hebrew word for vessel. So
you have to go through a kind of ego death, or the death of an old self, in order to see that fulfillment from a new level.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, when we understand the ego as not just the desires we have, which, Kabbalah says that the desires we have, desire to receive pleasure, it's not a bad thing. It's just matter. That's what it actually defines, that as matter. That's another very interesting thing in this wisdom. You can have a whole lesson just on that, about how our desire to receive pleasure is the matter of creation, is the substance of creation. And then, there's nothing bad about that. It's just matter. It's just what we're made of. The ego, when we say ego, we're not talking about just the desire to receive pleasure, but it's talking about the intention to receive it for my own personal benefit, which comes at the expense of others, like as if we're trying to subtract from others. And we can all picture that in different ways. So just going out and eating because I need to eat, it's not an egoistic desire that's doing detriment in the world and which is blocking the negative force. Rather, if I go out and I wish to exploit X and Y for my own personal benefit, then this is the ego working through me, because I'm wanting to feel pleasure by making them lower than me. And that's just nature. That's how this inflated egoistic desire comes out in people, that it's this intention to receive for personal benefit at others' expense. And that's what we're trying to put to death, not the desire itself, meaning that the desire to receive pleasure was created in order to actually ultimately fill it with pleasure. And the way to get that full ultimate feeling of pleasure is by inverting that egoistic intention upon it into that one which connects into that integral reality. In short, developing an altruistic intention upon the desire to receive pleasure, which actually allows the pleasure to be continuous and eternal and perfect. And then the only thing is we don't feel that in our egoistic desires. We can't picture that as a goal that we can aspire to. It's not another linear step in our development, but it's something that we have to rise above and start feeling in a new vessel. There's another part in that show, I remember how Dr. Laitman was talking about how, then you start identifying yourself as a different thing. Like you identify all of humanity as your own very self when that happens, because and that's what allows a person to be in bestowal, because they think of all other people as that place where they're feeling pleasure. And that's the whole aspect of the soul. And the soul is this place that, we feel pleasure when that pleasure is going outwardly from us into the whole system. So that's what we're here to learn. That's what Kabbalah brings us to, and that's what Kabbalists explain to us how to do, and what they explain in their texts, and what we try to exercise in connections that we form here in Kabbalah, etc.
I have to just tie that back to the topic of self-criticism, because this is exactly the point, that when we try and fix ourselves, right? We try to fix our inner voices by changing our internal dialogue and trying to kind of go deeper into ourselves and scrutinizing within ourselves, we stay inside the framework of the ego. And what we're describing here is that in order to truly be fulfilled, in order to truly be free of all this negativity, we are being invited and asked to connect to others, to our soul, to that greater vessel that is our true self, we really are, and where we can truly be fulfilled. And so this is really an opposite direction of what we've been trying to do throughout that linear phase of development, of the ego development, where we just try to fulfill ourselves by delving more and more into the self and investing more and more in the self. And here we reach a kind of point where we see that it's futile. It's not really making us happier. We're just becoming more and more depressed and anxious. And all of these mental health problems are becoming bigger and bigger, because we need to learn how to invert that direction from trying to fix things individually to connecting to others and to really transcending that sense of separateness in order to find freedom from the ego in the love and connection and mutual bestowal that we want to create with others. And so that's such a powerful understanding, that when you find yourself criticizing yourself and you find yourself falling into that trap, the real thing that can help you is to connect to friends, to an environment that uplifts you from the ego, that helps you to draw that positive force. That's the key to really healing all of these places within us that are suffering from the ego, that's become very overgrown and kind of twisted in that sense that it's attacking us instead of getting us what we want.
I'm actually seeing a question here on YouTube by a user called Closed. It says, so what is the point of life? Do we submit to being a robot? It's such a feeling of hopelessness. That's actually what we're talking about, that in our natural inborn state, if we're just following the demands of this ego that's giving its impulses to us to receive pleasure for our personal benefit at every moment. So that's the state where we're kind of like robots. You know, as we said, like characters in a movie, we could say it's like robots. You could also say that it's like animals, or, you know, Kabbalists use the word beasts really to kind of refer to it as being the animate level in activity. That we, in such a state, we are no different to animals in this world, other than we have this additional ability to envision future pleasure and agree to present pain in order to achieve that future pleasure. But ultimately, we're still trying to achieve that pleasure for our personal benefit alone. And since we do have this bigger egoistic desire, we also start doing things that animals don't do, which is enjoying the downfall of others. You don't see animals, you know, you don't see, when a lion goes to eat an antelope, it's not doing so thinking that, you know, I'm going to eat that antelope because I want to show him who's king around here and who's boss or anything like that. But, you know, humans can have these calculations. Animals just do it out of a survival necessity if they're like physically harming other animals, and it's structured and written that way in the system of nature. But with us, we're also functioning out of these impulses, but the problem is we have this more expansive egoistic desire which lets us enjoy at the expense of others and at the expense of nature. And that's exactly the point that's given to us to correct. So in order to rise above this level of simply being robots in that modus operandi, so that's what's given to us with this method, with this ability to draw, as Dr. Laitman keeps saying in that episode, that just to focus on drawing that positive force into our lives as much as possible, because the more we do that, the more we're given, as we said, the edge of that rope, of that next state, to actually rise above this level of being robots, animals, beasts, characters in the movie, however you want to call it, like this, of being in this unconscious mode, and actually discovering this new consciousness of what it means to really be conscious, to exercise our free will. That's exactly the point of our free will, to draw that force into our lives, to place ourselves in an environment, you know, with those means, you know, the study materials, the friends, that supportive environment of others who also have been given a certain kind of desire, a certain spark, what we call a point in the heart, to aim themselves at that next state, and who share that similar goal, that they also want to rise above this level of being, you know, robots, characters, etc., etc. And also with teachers who are able to guide us in that direction. And by doing so then we can literally rise above that unconscious level and discover what it truly means to attain consciousness, and discover true pleasure as well, ultimately, which is what this desire is unconsciously always going for, this desire to receive pleasure. It's always aiming in a direction of wanting pleasure, and then we're always finding ourselves with all kinds of shortcomings of that, because we don't have the correct mode of how to receive pleasure. And that's what Kabbalah comes and starts saying, that's the correction that needs to take place, of like learning how to receive pleasure in a way that's everlasting, that's eternal, that's fulfilling of the whole system, and not just of this tiny element trying to receive for itself alone, which is actually the definition of cancer. When you take that mode into cells in the body, that, you know, that a cancerous cell is one that tries to receive too much for itself at the expense of the body, and then that becomes cancerous and it becomes harmful to the body. So that's kind of how we're all acting now. So this is what we come to fix. I know there's some other questions here, but we're also coming to the end of this session. We have some other clip from this show that we'd like to play as well. Shall we put that on, Tal?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay, we'll go to the last clip here and see what Dr. Laitman's saying here.
One moment you made me responsible for everything, the next moment I'm not responsible for anything. You are responsible for the next moment. Always for the next moment. But never for the previous moment. Do you understand? It's like the experiment where a bullet, before it reaches the glass starts breaking. This confuses me. I understand it confuses you, but still, the result from advanced physics is that there is no time. Time doesn't exist. And past, present, and future, it's only relative towards us, toward what we feel. Therefore, saying in advance that I decide on the next moment, on the one hand, and after the moment has passed, saying that I couldn't have done anything about the situation, the system, the moment, is possible. And it is a split in our mind, which is becoming more and more deterministic from moment to moment, and how it really happens in nature. What scientists are discovering today, and not only today, dozens of years back, from 1910 more or less, that it started revealing with Einstein and even before him. What I don't get is, how do you not regret the failures of the previous moment? I don't regret them. Why? Because if it's predetermined by nature, then I'm in complete consent with it. But till a moment ago, it was your responsibility. But if it already passed, it's not my responsibility.
Right. Yeah, we kind of talked about that a fair bit during the show. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think we did. We talked about it. I think it's like easier said than done because we have to practice to be able to do this and to remind ourselves. And we also learn from Kabbalah that you can't really do this on your own. You have to be part of an environment that helps you to draw that positive force and really transform your whole mindset into a more integral mindset. But that's basically what happens. Eventually you learn how to see even a moment ago, the past as something that happened as it needed to have happened, and then to focus on your freedom of choice in the present moment. So I think that's really the biggest takeaway from our talk today, to not to eat yourself up, but to remember what is the important thing to do. So if any more questions, if people are asking, maybe...
Actually see one here from Nika. She's saying, where do we get examples of the good force to redirect the desire to receive? It should be, yeah. That's exactly what we're talking about, that the examples come from the environment we place ourselves in. All of our examples come from the environment we place ourselves in. So that's why Kabbalists determined that there's 3 key aspects of our environment that we need to continually choose in order to attract that good force or the positive force. And those are, as we talked about, the books, and not just any books, of course, but books written by those who have attained that positive force in their lives and who can write to us about it, and who not just write to us about it, but that when we're reading these texts, we're literally attracting that positive force to ourselves. If we think of that positive force as those thoughts of that higher level, as those attainments of the higher level that those Kabbalists attained. And Kabbalists also shouldn't be some kind of scary word here, as if all it means is Kabbalah is the word for receive. A Kabbalist is simply a person who has received that attainment of that positive force in their lives, who's risen above that egoistic approach to the world and attained that new way of giving to the world in an altruistic mode. Different to the way we understand giving in our current reality, but they attain that new intention. So they speak to us from there, they write to us from there, and investing ourselves in the environment that they set. The texts, the media, the teachers, and also the friends. Friends also, we're talking here, friend. In Hebrew, the word for friend, chaver, comes from the same word as connection, the same root, chibur, which means connection. So again, it's not just any friend in this world. It's not like the friend that we, it could just be meeting and talking about our common interest in football or anything like that. But it's friends who share that same desire who have an inkling to want to attract that positive force into life, and who feel that there's a certain dissatisfaction in just following our egoistic desires for pleasure, who feel that beyond the level of food, sex, family, money, honor, control, knowledge, there's got to be something more to life, something out there in this unknown that's worth investing our lives into, to draw that, something that gives us sincere and real sense and perception, like a clear perception and sensation of meaning and purpose. So those are the friends, and people who are literally willing to apply themselves to attract that positive force into life and to help each other to do so. And then you got the whole method of Kabbalah, which is really the example of that. Kabbalists come, and in their writings they give a whole method of, how to relate to oneself, to one's thoughts, to others that we share that environment with the friends, as we said. How we relate to the teacher, how we relate to really everything that happens in our lives, how we relate to all kinds of situations in life. Like today we just took one topic, self-criticism, and we saw how this relationship to it from a Kabbalistic perspective is to just cancel it completely. You don't really delve into self-criticism. The only self-criticism you do is how much can I apply myself to drawing that good force, that positive force into life, and then that force comes and it starts arranging things. And that's something which is a very, very empirical scientific approach, because we place ourselves as subjects into this, you could say, experiment of drawing this force which we don't know, but which Kabbalists tell us that it's the force that exists in the whole perspective of nature that we can attain, which exists outside of our current perception, but which we can make our perception equal to. And we work on drawing it according to their method. And according to our work that we do, we get feedback from doing so. And people who really apply themselves, get that feedback and can say, okay, something expanded, something happened, et cetera, and then moving on from there, just like any person undergoing empirical research. You want to add anything, Tal?
Yeah, that was well put. No, I think really it just turns out that this is the best way really to deal with any of these psychological phenomena in our lives. It's really just drawing that positive force is really the tool that helps you to elevate yourself above the anxieties and fears and all the negative self-talk, because you are connecting to that higher interconnected web or network that really pulls you out of that constricted perspective of life, of yourself. You begin to see yourself from a higher perspective and to see what happens to you, what, the purpose behind things that happen to you in your life, how it's evolving you, how it's helping you move forward. You just begin to reframe all the things that you used to judge before in a narrow way. You see it from a higher perspective, and it's just very, very liberating. And I think so important to so many of us who struggle with all of these things. So I think it's really helpful to be in such an environment that allows you to shift away from those old patterns and to just build new habits and new ways of helping yourself grow. And by the way, there was one thing that Dr. Lightman said that I think is really important, is that when you do this work, you learn how to see that everything that happens to you becomes like a teacher or another step in your process, and that every little puzzle or challenge that you receive actually is helping you to take your next step forward. So that's a really, I think, a beautiful realization.
Thanks, Tal. We'll end with that. We'll end with that beautiful realization that everyone can take with you. And just an announcement that after this session now, we're going to go into a 1-hour live Q&A session on Zoom, which we do actually every week. So if you did ask questions and you couldn't get them answered, feel free to come into Kabu and into that Zoom session where you can do that. You can ask anything that we talked about in this session. You can ask really anything that you want Kabbalah's answers to in general. It's really an open Q&A, and get them answered. I'll be headed there at least. So to do so, just go to, you'll be able to find the instructions in the chat. But anyway, you can go to kabuconnect.com/live and then click on Zoom. And if you're not a Kabu member, so after clicking on Zoom, you sign up for a free trial and then you click Zoom again, and then we'll see you in there. So thank you again very much, Tal. Thank you for everyone who's been with us. And until next time, this was Kabbalah Explained Simply. See you later. All right, thanks, Tal.